Hey, what's up YouTube? Today I'm going to be trying to get this track back aligned on my mini skid. You can kind of see it's popped off there. It happened when I was turning in this gravel and I was pushing this dump trailer over here in the spot. So I've learned that these things really do not like gravel at all. And what happens is this gravel will get kind of kicked off underneath the, in the track between the gear and the track itself, and it just kind of forces the track off of those gear teeth, and if you're turning at all, it'll kick the track off. I'll show you how I fix that. So there's a little cover plate here. Comes off, I believe it's a 10 millimeter. It's a real greasy job, so I like to put gloves on. Don't judge me. So yep, 10 millimeter, we'll pull it right off. And you can see there's a Zerk fitting in there. It's covered in grease. So I'll be pulling that little Zerk fitting off and then taking that, I think it's a 27 millimeter nut off. So I'm only taking this Zerk fitting off because you're supposed to be able to take just the Zerk off and push the grease back out of that cylinder that's in there. That's never worked for me. I've tried it several times, so I'll just show you what happens in case you are interested in looking at it. But I don't think you even have to take it off. In fact, from now on, I'll probably just go straight to the 27 millimeter nut and take it off. But I'm going to take it off anyway just to show you how it doesn't work, I guess. So the first thing I try is a 2x4, just prying against the arms, and obviously I've got the machine jacked up. I didn't show that part, but it's lifted off the ground, sitting on a floor jack and a jack stand. Then I try firing up the machine to use the hydraulics as a hydraulic, mechanical advantage to push the track back or that idler back. And I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if there's something wrong with the Zerk fitting or that whole assembly. I do know that I've had the same thing happen on more than one machine on different tracks, and it's always the same. Like, I just can't get enough mechanical force to push that grease out. And here I apply enough pressure to actually split the block, and I couldn't tell that it moved at all. So after being defeated so many times, I just go straight to this 27 millimeter, and you can see it's real hard to get to. I find a 12 point or better will work best, and I didn't notice it until I watched this footage back on high speed, but you can actually see the track start to loosen as the grease is, pushing around the threads while I get this off. It takes forever. And one thing I do want to point out is there's a little spring right there, so don't lose that. Now I'm out of the shot here, but I'm at the front of the machine just using a 2x4 like the very first method I showed you, just a mechanical advantage against the track and the lift arms, but that pushes all the grease out, moves the idler arm, and that'll work. So with the machine jacked up, I try a couple different methods. It's also running, but this is sped up like 6x, so I'm definitely not moving this fast. I'm very slowly turning the tracks and keeping my fingers out of the way. But I found the best method is actually prying against the ground underneath the machine and just letting the pry bar kind of drag along with the gear and the track, and eventually I hit the sweet spot and I get everything to fall on. There might be an easier way to do this, but it's the best way I have found so far. The only thing special about reassembly is making sure you don't lose that spring I talked about earlier, and the Zerk fitting has to be lined up facing you so that you can put grease back in it. And I use a 10 millimeter to hold it. The problem is sometimes the socket's too deep and the Zerk falls down in it, and then you can't get the threads to reach. So what I wind up doing is putting a little pebble or a crushed up or folded up piece of paper inside the socket to help push that Zerk fitting all the way to the end, so you can get it lined up and get it threaded on. Then you have to use that 10 millimeter to hold it as you tighten the 27 millimeter nut. This part can be pretty frustrating, getting it lined up perfectly, and it just takes some patience, as every time you want to tighten the 27 millimeter, it wants to spin the Zerk fitting. So just gonna finagle it a little bit back and forth to get in the right spot. Then it's time for grease. Now when you put grease in this cylinder, all it's doing is pushing that idler arm forward, and that is creating the tension on the track that keeps it tight. You can kind of see it moving there in the front. Now I do think there is such a thing as too tight. I feel like I've over tightened them before, and they kind of click and just sound like they're binding up, and you probably could run the potential of bending some of that cheap Chinesium. And my grease gun always gets stuck on these. I hate it so much. So after this, I actually went and ordered a lock and lube that I'd seen it advertised a bunch to me, and this thing is a lifesaver. I would not go without it now that I have one, and I will link that in the description below. So cover plate and test drive, and I'll show you what that cylinder tensioner assembly looks like. In case you were wondering, this is what that assembly looks like. Just sits inside that tube there, and as you add grease, it just pushes that cylinder forward against the idler arm and tightens the track. It's pretty simple. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.